Hey guys, what is up? AwesomeTheSauce here. Hope you guys are having a great day and welcome to a video that all of y'all wanted me to make. Ever since the Betrayal change, where basically Betrayal doesn't give chromatic traps, but it once again gives myth trap, the entire game has changed. And a bunch of y'all wanted me to make a tier list of all the schools at max level and basically just rank them from worst to best. And honestly, I didn't really expect it, but Delusion and Betrayal only giving myth traps now after clearing shields and weaknesses, it did change the game a lot. This tier list is very different from my last tier list. Without further ado, I'm gonna be ranking all the schools at max PvP, giving y'all my reasoning. We're gonna start with what I believe is the worst school at max PvP. This is gonna sound crazy to a lot of people, and honestly, I do think that it is still possible to rank up on this school. But honestly, I think Fire is by far, if you're trying to get consistent wins, it is probably the worst school at max PvP. Now, right now, it's super meta to trap stack and go for a Jhin. Honestly, it's not really even trap stack like it used to be. Potent, if you don't know, is no PvP. So this spell, which you would use to enchant traps, it's no PvP. So really, you can only do regular fuels, TC fuels, and the occasional item card fuel. But because Jhin does 2000 damage base for 9 pips, it is extremely viable to use this spell. And what it does is, after clearing 4 traps, it does 2000 damage. If you have a bunch of traps that you can cover with like a fuel, basically you're just sitting on a ton of damage. And yes, while trap stack is really good, I would argue that the tankier the school, the harder it is to pull off. And that's just because they'll traps counter, they'll reshuffle, they'll be able to actually tank your really big shot that you're trying to pull off. And considering that balance, ice, life, they're all fairly tankable and they can really play off of trap counters pretty easily, I'd say that Fire just has a lot of bad matchups when trap stacking. Even though Elephant is super good for clearing shields and doing damage, unfortunately, because of how high flat resist is, really that overtime for 5 rounds, it's kind of a weakness. Yes, it can clear shields for 5 rounds, but that's also 5 rounds where flat resist is acting. This is the same reason why Fire was low in the last tier list, but I feel like even after doing trap stack, I'm still not really having fun on this school. So I feel like something's missing. It's not a bad school, you can totally compete. I just think it's the worst out of all the 7. Number 6 on this tier list most certainly has to be Storm. Now y'all, I'll say this, I honestly think that healing Storm is extremely viable right now, and the setup that I run for it is actually pretty easy to do. Like, I got Aeon hat and I got Void boots. I mean, the Void boots are raid gear, but really the whole idea is you just put 2 mending jewels and you have 46 outgoing, and honestly that's more than enough to compete in PvP with healing. But essentially, when you run stuff like Berry, Surprise, you run Dark and Stormy, obviously, Sanctuaries, Tranquilities, maybe even, when you really start, you know, going into that healing identity, you can actually mitigate damage while creating a lot of pressure as the highest damage school. The only reason why I think healing and hitting on a Storm doesn't work so well is because you're extremely susceptible to a one-shot strat. And I'll be honest, I find it really weird that Storm has such low HP. I honestly think that Storm should have as much HP as Myth or Fire, but it should come at the expense of some of its other stats, like maybe Pierce or even Resist. But I do like that Calypso's really good against healing. I do like that, you know, Rusalka's still extremely good against, like, you know, schools that are more offensive. That being said, the health is too low, and for that reason alone, it's gotta be low on the tier list. I'm putting Ice at number 5 on this tier list. Now, in my opinion, the Betrayal change, like, it really did help both Fire and Storm, because, you know, if they're fragile, you don't want a 40 trap on every shield that you have, right? Like, let's say that someone were to use old Betrayal and I shielded on a Storm. Let's say a Death used it. They would break the shield and I would have a 40 Death trap. I'd basically be one shot on a Storm. While yes, those schools did get benefited a lot from the Betrayal change, I feel like obviously Ice, the shield school, super benefited because now Betrayal is only good on Myth. And now that every matchup isn't ridiculous against Ice when they shield, now they can actually do stuff like set shield. They can do stuff like even Jin's defense. I feel like these triple shields were utterly stupid before because people would just Betrayal them. Now you can not only set up Ice on, you could even do stuff with Colossus. You could do stuff with, you could do a lot of stuff. You could just defend yourself with triple shields. I will say this, I honestly don't think that their resist is anything special anymore. Like, I don't have a brace jewel, right? But let's say that I, you know, know, had 61 resist for one reason or another, this would get fully pierced by both fire and myth. And it would get mostly pierced by most of the other schools. Like, Death gets 50 pierce, Storm easily gets 50 pierce. Unless you're constantly trying to defend yourself, you're gonna take too much damage to compete. And that's why Ice is so low. It's pretty goddamn hard to set up any Gambit at this point. Like, yeah, you can shield in Scion, but 11 pips for 2,000 damage, it's really not as good of a trade as you'd think. I'm gonna be honest, I think the one saving grace right now, in my opinion, and this is gonna be a weird shout, I think the one saving grace is actually Ice Wyvern. I think the fact that you can get rid of blades and add a 45 trap, it just essentially makes blading a horrendous move. Single blading, double blading, it doesn't matter. It's just a bad move against this spell. I feel like Ice is the only school where single blading is such a bad move. And, you know, you can throw frostbites into the pool. You can obviously use bombs and stuff. But I think this spell gives Ice just one edge that it needs to stay up there in this tier list. I know everyone and their mama is gonna disagree with this. I don't give a damn. This is my tier list, so it's mine. I do it. I'm putting Myth at number 4. Now, hear me out, y'all. Do I think it's easy to rank up on a Myth? Yes, I do. However, so does everybody else, which means absolutely everybody and their mom, they're also warded to Myth. I feel like right now, yes, you get a lot of damage in Pierce, but it's almost essential as a Myth now that you Shrike if you're trying to play against anybody, because you're just gonna have to assume that they have ward. I will say this, the Betrayal change makes it so that Shift is good because people are overtiming more to break set shields. And honestly, I probably should be set shielding more to set up Jhin so that, you know, so that I can somewhat adapt to the meta. I could be doing more on this guy to adapt, but I think the fact of the matter is Myth is a high utility school, not a high damage school in general. And I do feel like as a result of that, right, when people are warding like crazy, I just don't think you actually can keep up, especially when they do stuff like ward with Brace. Then you have to Shrike. Everyone has Myth Dispel now. But I think the second you get a tanky school with ward, it's lights out. Like, it's gonna take you a while to get there. You have to play very well. You have very little room for error. It's a nightmare of a situation going against like a Life or an Ice that's Myth warded. It is a nightmare. And just for the fact that Life and Ice wizards and Balance wizards and all those wizards are so much more likely to ward now to Myth, I just think that puts them at a slight disadvantage in this tier list. That's the only reason. Stone Colossus hitting through weaknesses, Splash Squatch stealing and hitting, Celestial being utterly stupid. These are all great things for Myth. I just don't think they outweigh the fact that ward can dismantle you. I know this is where the tier list gets controversial, y'all, because you're probably like, yo, if Betrayal is worse, then the trap counter school is also going to be worse because no one's using Betrayal. I'd agree with you if Life were just a trap counter school, but it's way more than that. I feel like now that people aren't using Betrayal to get rid of set shields, they're using overtimes a lot. And not only can Life literally just push the overtime away, which nobody really uses this, but I think it's worth, especially against good overtimes, you can also just turn overtimes into a gigantic heal. So I feel like, yes, set shields are better because Betrayal isn't a thing, but also you can use set shields to bait OTs and just heal. And because so many people run such high damage, people really don't actually use heal counters. And yes, that could be a throw. It might not be a throw. You don't need heal counters if you're doing a lot of damage. But I feel like if you go against someone that doesn't actually pack heal counters, I feel like goat monking and hungrying, it's just kind of a guaranteed W against some schools. It just gets to that point where Life, they can really just heal their way to victory super easily while also hitting against people with way lower resist. When you count the fact that people don't ward and the fact that you can counter OTs, I think Life just goes super high up there. I think those strengths super outweigh the fact that, yeah, your resist is actually kind of low for a tanky school. Your damage is obviously kind of low. As much as there are issues, I just think that the strengths just totally outweigh the weaknesses on a Life wizard. Balance is number 2. Bruh, Balance is so goated right now, and the fact of the matter is they have not audited the spells on this man's school, but even still they have so many things that are just so useful that I don't even know where it starts and stops when it comes to Balance being OP. I think Scales is gonna feature in these tier list videos until they literally gas the spell. I don't think they're gonna, I don't think they're gonna make the spell any much worse, but it is still extremely powerful. You just throw on a Magnify and just spam this, get pips back. It's ridiculous. Not to mention Lore Master super good. You have really good trap counters with both Locust Swarm and Riding. And as if all of that wasn't enough, with the Betrayal change, very recently anyways with the Betrayal change, they also made Mockenspiel a much better Shad. It can either blade or weakness, both of which are extremely good. I also think that Gearhead is, funnily enough, a super meta spell because it counters Storm Healing and anybody OTing that's not fire, because it doesn't do anything about protected stuff. And now that people aren't betraying set shields, I think Gearhead is pretty goddamn good. And obviously, like the stats, I mean, 180 damage, 50 pierce. I mean, it's crazy. These stats just go absolutely ham for a school that's supposed to balance out every stat. It's nuts. It's so good that it hurts. I thought long and hard about who would be at the top of this tier list, and very honestly, this is a weird choice for me because Death is not the school that I've had the easiest time PvPing on. I would argue that I've had an easier time PvPing on Ice. I've had an easier time PvPing on Balance, but I think that if you play all of your cards right, I genuinely think your highest win rate should be on a Death. There's a couple of reasons for this. The gear that basically added pip chance and accuracy to every single school, the gear that did this, it also made it so that you could ward twice or 3 times if you want on any school, including Death. And if y'all don't know, Death has a ton of resist even before you start warding. Without a Mighty Pet, right? I'm at 67 base resist. And it's only when I start adding pins and wards and all of that to the mix where you really start seeing how crazy that can get. So I think just the insane ability to ward and still keep your damage extremely high, it just makes Death really, really good. And I feel like shield gambits are just better without Betrayal being a thing. And I think Doomoni is the best shield gambit for the school that it's on. I think the fact that, unlike Myth, you can spam shields while you're also threatening weaknesses just gives you an utterly insane level of tankability. And even if you're falling behind, you can always just strike and throw in a Vaughn. And I think Vaughn is extremely good for a 9 pip TC. And that's simply because for the damage per pip that it does, Vaughn TCs are just utterly broken. Because it's not just the fact that it does 900 damage, it's the fact that you get half of it back for HP. I think the same reason that Doomoni became not a drain is the reason why Vaughn is so good. Should they do something about it? That I don't know. I mean, it's a drain school. Should they really be nerfing drains and not other things? I really don't know. But I think when you throw in the combination of weaknesses, shields, and extremely powerful drains, I just think that you're sitting on tons of defense, tons of recoverability. I think almost every move either saves you HP or recovers you HP depending on what you're doing. It seems to me that Death combines weaknesses, shields, and a form of healing with drains better than any other school, and I just think it's really, really hard to put down a Death for the count. Let me know what you guys think of this tier list. Obviously, you know, this is the post-betrayal delusion tier list, so I think it is a little different. Let me know what I got right, what I got wrong. Let me know y'all's experiences. I would love to see all of y'all weigh in on the comments. As always, drop a like if you enjoyed, leave a sub if you're new, and if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong, so stay awesome, y'all. And yeah.